This week on the Notorious Scoundrels podcast.
Man, Jerry, we're gonna need to put like a medical advice disclaimer on this episode. You know? not a doctor, just a lot of internet, you know.
Welcome to the Notorious Scoundrels, a podcast focused on tactics and competitive play for Star Wars Legion. Hosted by Kyle Dornbos, Michael Barry, and David Zelenka, with Jay Shalansky, the man behind the glass.
Welcome back to another episode of the Notorious Scoundrels. I'm David, joined by Mike Dashes Barry and Jay, the Fifth Trooper Shalansky. What's up, guys?
Hey, yo. We got some stuff to talk about today.
Yes, we have a lot of stuff to talk about today, and I think the first thing we're going to lead off with is the fact that this weekend, well, you've heard of Prime Day, but have you heard of Prime Weekend? There were 7 primes that occurred on the weekend of January 11th. For those of you that are not familiar, a Prime Championship is what they're calling store champs these days. It is a tournament at the store level. It's a competitive event, and the person who places first gets an invite to the World Championship at Adepticon in late March. Although we're kind of late in the process now, so some of these invites are getting handed down because people are playing in repeat appearances. And so if the people who have invites sometimes win these things, right? And the invite gets passed down to the next person who doesn't have it.
That's okay.
Yeah, I'm totally cool with that. I'd rather be able to play than not play. We kind of talked about that.
Let me propose a question to the panel here, and once again, thanks for having me on, guys. It's a pleasure. Do you like you guys had a choice? No. So, do you feel like calling it the World Championship is a little bit misleading?
Whoa. When we're talking about World Championship, are we not talking about Adepticon?
We are, but do you feel like that's misleading? I feel like it's misleading.
Can you elaborate on why you feel it's misleading before we answer?
Yeah, I think okay, because you get this card that says you're invited to the World Championship or whatever, and you're going to the World Championship, but really there's 3 days of tournament before you even actually make it to what we would call the World Championship.
Well, so a couple things. I think that last year was not indicative of what the air quotes World Championship should look like.
Agreed.
Yeah. For a variety of reasons. First off, Europeans just didn't have a chance to get there. Or I shouldn't say Europeans. I should say if you're not from North America, you pretty much didn't have
Agreed.
any way to get there unless you paid oodles of money, which is not super fair. So let's start there. But I think if we're thinking about it in terms of this is the World Championship for Star Wars Legion, I don't know what the numbers are going to be. It's probably somewhere between 150 and 200 people. It sort of sounds like. I don't know. I think it's reasonable as long as everybody in other places around the world that had primes get invites and stuff.
Okay, so maybe here's where my head's at. Maybe this is the sports fan in me, right? Like the Super Bowl, the World Series, like all these things that are like the title of what you're winning are down to like whoever the last 2 teams are. And I understand in our, game, it maybe it's the last 4 or whatever. But the problem I'm having with it is you're not invited to the World Championship. You're invited to the playoffs to attempt to make it to the World Championship is kind of where my head's at, because I feel like the first 2 heats, Thursday and Friday, are the playoffs, right? Like you got to make the wild card round before you can make it to the Northeast Championship or what, you know what I mean? And then you make it to Worlds on Sunday. So that's kind of where my head's at.
So I actually think it's not that far from what other I guess non-athletic sports would term as their world championships. Like, for instance, StarCraft is pretty analogous to what Legion aspires to be, right? And if WCS was just discontinued for something else, but they had a circuit called the World Championship Series, and essentially there were 4 tournaments each year, and their layout was basically what our World Championship is. There's like 120 players or something get together, they fight for a couple of days, and then the bracket gets narrowed down, and then on the last day, 8 players play in a 8-player single elim bracket. Jay shaking his head at me because my phone was ringing. Sorry.
Amateur
hour here. Amateur hour. Look, man, it's Tuesday. We don't normally record today. So I don't know. I mean, like, I don't think it's misdelivering the message of what a world championship should be.
No, I guess maybe, and so I think my larger thought is, and we had brought this up on our podcast, is that and not just because they're calling it worlds, but because I like to set expectations for people, right? So like, for instance, these prime championships, you go to your local store, you win a prime, but you didn't, maybe at some stores there's some top level play, and maybe, at your store there's 1 or 2 players that are really, really good. I'm not trying to take that away from anyone.
David? Do you see what he's doing right now?
I do see a little bit.
This is like the subtlest segue into something Jay wanted to talk about. Like, I didn't.
Right.
What do you do?
So I don't want to prevent you from talking about that, Jay. But I think before we leave this idea of like what is a worlds tournament.
Well, yeah, and I guess I won't go too deep into that. So I'm sorry.
Sure.
I apologize.
Okay.
I just wanted to say that you go from a local. It's like playing the local teams, and then you're just all of a sudden in worlds. Is where I was heading with that.
Okay. So yeah, there's no intermediate tier, right? You go from your local store to the biggest tournament.
Correct.
Well,
and there's no like regional tier. There's no like step ladder progression.
Yes.
You have a chance to go from your tiny group to the big league, essentially.
Right. I think the major difference here is that there is an intermediate tier. It just doesn't require you to qualify for it.
Right. And those are like all kind of open tournaments, right? As long as you register on time or in time, like within 4 hours of the tournament being available, or however short the window for LVO was this year before they added the second heat, you're in. And there's no like pre-qualification.
And I think that is mostly if that's going to change, it's going to change because the game gets bigger, right? Like, you can't really have a multi-structured tier system like that unless you have a massive support structure underneath it, right? So like, we're talking about like if you're going to have Nova be something you have to qualify for, you've got to feed like 64 to 130 invites into Nova. So like, how do you decide whose primes qualify for Nova? I think that gets really messy and really complicated, frankly.
That's fair.
I'm not saying that is necessarily a bad way to do it.
Well, and I guess one could argue, now I'm thinking about it, the way it's structured at Adepticon is kind of like that, right? They've just calling it differently. What I'm saying is, I think just looking at it on a surface level, you read World Championship, where last year we had High Command, right? Well, we had Last Chance Qualifier and then High Command and then Worlds. I almost would, and listen, this is me just nitpicking, right? But like, I would almost want that back again, where it was like, you have an invitation to High Command, which I think is what mine said on my RPQ card. But like, you have an invitation to High Command. If you win, or if you're in the top X of High Command, you move on to day 1 of Worlds. That, you know what I mean? Like, I just kind of want that like intermediate like level, so it feels like you're tiering up almost.
Yeah, I mean, I will say that while I think last year was not indicative of what they're going to do for Star Wars Legion competitive play in the future, I think it was really awesome. And I think that them cutting the top 8 of Adepticon and then moving it, 2 months down the line and having this really cool showy tournament and calling it Worlds. Like I prefer that.
Yeah.
I mean, there's no doubt about it. I just I have a hard time believing that is financially a responsible thing for FFG to be doing, especially given all of the financial changes they're clearly undergoing.
Oh, what do you mean? What's happening?
What? I don't know. The house is sort of on fire.
I think they're referring to the layoffs that happened, and then the fact that we got an announcement today that Destiny, the CCG, has been basically terminated. Like as soon as Covert Missions is done, that's it. There's no more Destiny being printed.
I really like. So I don't play Destiny, so I'm not like heartbroken about this, but like, why would you release that information before the set dropped? Like what?
Yeah, that's like going to kill your sales, isn't it?
Like what are you doing? Like
I don't know.
Like,
it's
wait for the set to drop. 3 months goes by, be like, oh yeah, we're canceling Destiny.
I mean, it's a poor financial decision, but on the other hand, it's also an honest thing. Like you buy into it, you spend all this money, and you're hoping to get some return on it, and then suddenly that you buy in, and then like like 2 months later, they're going to say, oh, that's it, that's the end.
I mean, I think that that's maybe fair to the players.
Yeah.
But I think that a lot of people are probably, I don't know, I hope that people would still buy the product because it's probably a good game. But like that screws the retailers that pre-ordered your product.
Yes. So and I was just going to say I don't think it is a financial problem for them because I think the distributors have already ordered their share, which I don't think there's probably something in the clause that says they can't return it. Yeah. And then the retailers have already pre-ordered. So FFG is not out any money.
Well, I know I was, doing a little surfing of the net, kind of watching everybody QQ about them canceling it. And it sounds like Team Covenant's like subscriptions or whatever, like already triggered like payments for this new set and you can't get a refund.
Yo.
People are really upset about it.
They should be.
I don't know, but I mean, like, it's not Team Covenant's fault that like FFG decided to be like, oh yeah, we're canceling this game, but we're going to release a product for it in a month and a half. I don't know. I think, it's another like right hand doesn't know what the left hand is doing.
So, yeah, it looks terrible.
Yeah, it's not great. Yeah. Anyways.
So let me, if I may, can I pose a question?
Yeah.
Yes. I want to circle back to the idea of the World Championship as a World Championship.
All right, finish that now then. Finish that.
So Worlds to me, it's more about who is there rather than how you got there. To me, it's more about the prestige. It's one tournament that's prestigious enough to get people from all over the world to spend enormous time and resources preparing, securing accommodation, traveling, playing at. It's just a prestige indicator, and it's also a participation indicator.
But doesn't it lower the prestige if everyone's going?
No, I don't think so.
Well, because first of all, I don't think everyone's going.
Okay.
Yeah, not everyone's going. It's only the people who are, one, good enough to want to spend X resources getting there.
That's
also
fair.
The people who think they have a shot at winning.
Okay, so let me ask you this: in March Madness, right, in NCAA basketball, is if you make it to the top 64 and you're like St. Mary's or whatever, like, is that prestigious that you've made it to the March Madness bracket? Not really. It's not until you make it to like the top 16.
I don't know. Basketball sucks, but
whoa.
Ouch.
Whoa. Walk that back.
Look, man, I'm from Syracuse. We've had a good basketball team.
Yeah.
At times.
Right.
So I hear all
How
about it.
dare you, sir?
Oh, dare you?
Okay, use something. I don't know. Is there? I'm trying
No,
to.
it's
I
fine. We
guess.
can use March Madness. I think that's a really good
Yeah.
example of what's
Yeah.
going on. And I think the answer to that is yes. It is prestigious if you make the March Madness bracket. Like some teams probably have never made it before, or like have made it very few times. It is important. I think. I mean, like there's been a couple times that SU has missed the bracket in the past decade. I couldn't tell you how many times that is, but I know that everybody in Syracuse gets pretty upset when
Yes.
SU doesn't make the March Madness bracket. So to me, that says, yeah, it's probably important.
Okay, so maybe I'm looking at it from an SU perspective because more often than not we make the bracket, right? So I think in a Syracusean way, like until they make the Sweet 16, I'm really, and for those of you that don't know, it goes 64-32, 16-8, 4-2-1. And so, Sweet 16 is kind of where you like perk up and you're like, oh, we're in the Sweet 16. All right. Well, we might, you know what I mean? Like that's kind of where it's, and maybe you're right though. Maybe if it's like St. Bonaventure or somebody who out of nowhere that's like, oh, we made it to the March Madness tournament, like we have a chance. So maybe I'm wrong here. Maybe you guys have changed my mind.
Okay,
My own
I
analogy.
think though I'm tracking what you're saying, Jay, is that this idea of sort of like, well, if it's a store champ, maybe we don't care so much about it. And why should that, why should the pipeline be, from the store to the big tournament? I sort of understand that. On the other hand, two things. I think that the wargaming culture is not necessarily concerned at all times with who is the best at any given game.
Okay.
And so fair. Worlds could just be a stand-in for, this is a celebration of how this hobby is enjoyed across the world. In our case, this game Legion is a worldwide game. It's played in many different countries. We are having this once a year gathering where all the people involved come to play. If they can come to one place from all over, the Europeans, the Australians, the people from folks in South America, et cetera, who come to play in our events. But in terms of like, who is the best, that's not necessarily the primary concern. And that's an interesting dynamic in this whole
I think
culture.
We switched podcasts because I'm like hyper competitive today. And you're like, hey man, we're just celebrating the hobby. You should be on Fifth Trooper.
It's a historical phenomenon, right? I mean, yes. I don't know did you play Warhammer like when they had soft scores and things like that?
Yeah.
And you were graded on your sportsmanship and your painting?
Yes.
On top of whether you were the best general? Right.
I mean, I think you're both right here. And I think what it comes down to is that, Jay, I think you're coming at this from a Patriots perspective. Okay. Your season
You're not
doesn't...
Tom Brady,
look, I'm a Patriots fan, and like our season generally doesn't start until after Wild Card Weekend. Okay. Yes. That's just what it is. And that's how it's been for the last 2 decades. We've got a first round bye. Like our season doesn't start until the second week of the playoffs. And I think you're kind of coming at this from my season doesn't start until Worlds happens, because and for some people like the Kyle Dornboses and the Luke Cooks and the David Zelenkas and the Eric Rehas of the world, like that's true.
Yeah.
But there are other people like the Washington Redskins or the Tennessee Titans or the Oakland Raiders who, when they make the wild card weekend, they're like, hell yeah, like we're going to the world.
Better than we've done in a while. Yes.
And so I think first of all, both of those things are healthy to have, but I think looking at that from 2 different viewpoints is important because, to some people, the Dallas Cowboys are never going to make the playoffs again. Sorry, Cowboys.
Stupid Cowboys.
How many sports team fans can we alienate in one podcast?
Right.
Oh, give me a few minutes. I'll get them all.
There you go.
But I think that's kind of the more meta answer to your question.
Okay.
You're just a Patriots fan for Star Wars Legion, man. Welcome to the club.
Well, yeah, and I guess I have more to say based on what you just said, but you guys didn't want me segueing into that topic yet, so I can wait.
No, I think
it's a
I
good
think
place.
now would be a
we're
good
down
time.
a
Okay.
rabbit hole.
All right.
Let's go.
So
Yeah, we're so
going
far down this
to
rabbit
Mike's
hole.
analogy, where these people, teams that maybe like, most of us using the Patriots analogy, like our season doesn't start until playoffs. And then some people are just so grateful to go to playoffs. Here is my, I guess it's a thesis that I'm throwing at you guys, is that does that make those teams, those players ill prepared for what is about to happen? And is it a feels bad that you spent money, like you're like, oh my God, you go to your wife and your family or, your whoever you're with, whatever. And you're like, I have a ticket to Worlds. I'm going to go. Like, this is a big deal. Like, I have a ticket to Worlds. And then you go and you get spanked, let's say. And then you lose and you just lose bad. And then is that a feels bad now? Because there was no kind of like intermediate like test to make sure. I'm not saying you're bad out there, and I'm not saying people at different stores can't be good. I'm just saying, what if there is a store, hypothetically speaking, where everyone who played at the Prime is maybe just learning the game, and so one of them won and got a chance to go to Worlds. They go to Worlds, and then let's hypothetically say they get stomped.
Okay, so the analogy you're bringing up is who in the Star Wars Legion world made it to Worlds by winning the NFC East, and and the answer is yeah. I mean, the answer is potentially yes, right?
Right.
Like you could have had your local Prime championship is essentially winning your division
Yep.
in football and qualifying for Worlds.
Yes.
Right? And that's essentially what it is, if we're going to stick with this analogy, which I don't think is terrible. And sometimes your division sucks.
Yeah.
And you're the Eagles and you make it in. Like and that happens. And you get to the playoffs and you get stomped on wild card weekend and you go home. I think the nice thing about Star Wars Legion is that you're going to play 4 games on whatever day you're on. Hopefully they're not all terrible. But, I also hope that the people that are going probably prep themselves to know what sort of things to expect at an event like that.
I was going to kind of say, if they have internet access, they can do some Googling and figure out what to do to win.
Sure, but can they legitimately? Okay, so can they legitimately practice? So to kind of combine the two, like and I like the basketball model a little bit better than the football model, just from the play structure, not the game.
Sure. Yeah.
But like, okay, so for instance, with like basketball, with the men's NCAA basketball, you have your division, which is let's say the Big East used to be, right? We're the AAC now, but like the Big East, and you're fighting and you're playing each other in the Big East to then get the Big East champion, right? Then when the Big East champion goes to the NCAA tournament, and then they play it in these division, it's like 64, 32, 60. So what I'm saying is you're going from playing non-division teams straight to the championship or to March Madness. So there's no like kind of like practice session in between non-division to the world. Like there's no like divisional championship to go back to, or wild card weekend to go back to football, where wild card weekend is like, okay, here's 2 teams that didn't quite make it. How do we get them into the playoffs? Okay, so here's what they do.
So I don't think anything you're saying is completely wrong. And what I will say is that if if you're qualified for Worlds, you probably should try to get to a Nova, Gen Con, LVO level event under your belt before you go to Worlds, because it'll give you an idea of what it will be like. If you don't know what it'll be like, and I think
Right, like seeking out practice opportunities, right? It just makes sense.
yeah,
Right, you should go to a 30+ person tournament if it's feasible for you financially.
right.
I mean, if not, there are blogs, there are articles. You know, we host one ourselves.
Yeah,
Notorious Scoundrels is part of the Trooper, the writing that we do. Part of that is aimed at getting folks who, you know, don't have access to practice games or other resources like that to get them some assistance. Right? It's part of what we do because we want them to come to these events. We want to have a good time. I was just thinking about something that Jay said about being smashed at like Worlds or Wildcard Weekend. You know, we don't really want that because we don't want to risk someone like having a really truly bad experience.
Well,
and not coming back.
And hopefully your opponents are nice enough that like maybe you lose the games, but it's a good experience, right? Like those two things are not mutually exclusive. Like
right, definitely.
I mean, maybe going 0-4 is just gonna suck no matter what. I don't know.
Yeah,
but like
I think
you
so.
know, but like you know, if you play against good people who make the games fun, like it's you know. It's probably still a good experience. You still get to hang out. You still get to watch other good players play. I think the nice thing about it is that, you know, if this is your first time going to Worlds, which for a lot of people it will be because there's only been 2 of them, and this is the second, and is that like there's going to be another one, and you can learn from this one, and that's okay. You know. I don't know.
No, I totally agree with you, and I think our community, generally speaking, is just it's good enough and it's non-toxic enough that I think a lot of folks are just aware of, you know, how that other player is feeling. I think people are sensitive and are, you know, at least, you know, someone in that mindset of like, you know, oh man, I remember when, you know, and I remember getting smashed, and I want to make that, you know, I still want to make this game a fun experience.
And I guess yes, and I'm not saying that wasn't a slight against our community at all. I'm just asking. I guess I'm just proposing the question. Like, is it a feels bad? I don't know. I was just wondering.
It depends on, I think, one, your opponent, and two, your mental or emotional even keeledness. You know, kind of your ability to sustain losses without flying off the handle.
Yeah, and I mean, hopefully, you know, if an RPQ or a Prime Championship is the only thing you've ever won, you don't have the expectation of taking down Worlds is like a firm, concrete goal, you know?
Right.
Like, you know, it should probably be to make day 2 or, you know, like just make the first cut. And that's a decent thing to be able to do, you know?
I guess maybe go ahead. I'm sorry.
Well, I was gonna say, even for experienced players, that like, you know, I'm gonna be perfectly happy as long as I make day 2, I'm gonna be happy. You know, that's
agreed. And I guess where I worry is sometimes we get people that I meet when we go to these tournaments, or people that message us that ask us about rules that are just like their entire community is just playing the rules completely wrong, like, and have been for a while, and they've kind of like siloed themselves into their community, and it's more of like those people maybe that I'm thinking about, where I'm like, okay, like, I mean, they have the internet because they messaged us, so they could have looked that up, and they've been playing it wrong, and so now they all play it wrong. Everyone in that community, the guy wins, he or girl wins, and then comes to Worlds and is like, nope, you're playing that wrong. Nope, you can't do moisture evaporators twice on one turn. Nope, you know what I mean? Like, they have all these misconceptions of the game.
And I mean, that happened last year.
Yeah, that's true.
I mean, like, frankly, like, we had a lot of judge calls at high command on things that probably shouldn't have needed to be touched. I'm sure Brennan can go into it more than I can, but, you know, all sorts of stuff, you know.
Maybe I'm just being a worrier.
Yeah, I mean, I think to some extent, like, just gotta let people play, man. Like, and it'll be okay. You know, some people are gonna lose. Somebody has to go 0-4. Like, everybody that's there could be, you know, absolutely crazy, insane, amazing. Somebody's gonna go 0-4. You know, it's just that's how the math works out.
Right. Not all 8 players won Worlds last year.
Right. You know, and like not, you know, it's just not how it works.
Understood.
So.
All right.
Well, I gotta say, speaking of the sort of silo effect, or maybe the sort of small, I guess we could call it like a small, like self-contained meta effect. I just want to say that a lot of the focus lately has been on activation count, and I'm looking at some of the lists that are, you know, coming back from these primes, and people are winning these primes with 8 and 9 activation lists, which is definitely bucking like the trend that we've seen, which is, you know, 11 or bust.
Well,
among like the high level competitive folks, or people we would consider high level, people who are like constantly showing up at the upper echelons of worlds, etc. You know,
I don't want to take anything away from people that have won these tournaments, because it's an accomplishment. It's a good thing. You did awesome. And Jay, this is where I thought you were headed with what you were going to say. So I'm going to bring it up, and I'm going to be the jerk.
See what I did there?
Yeah, I did. He threw me straight under the bus, because you know that I can't avoid this sort of thing. So first of all, good job winning a tournament with an 8 or 9 activation list. I'd recommend not bringing that to Worlds. You know, there's a big difference between a 3 or 4 round tournament and a like 10 to 11 round tournament.
So walk that through for us. So
yeah.
So
without being so local store, not everybody is going to be super high caliber. Okay, it's not terribly unreasonable to assume that 2 of your 4 rounds are going to be against people that probably you have like a substantial leg up on the game, to the point where you're like 80-20 to win before dice start rolling.
I would agree with that.
That's like, if you're a competitive player, there are people going to RPQs that like just want to go for promos, or just like going to hang out and have fun, and that's totally cool and totally fine. And those people don't. There's people that go to these things that don't care about winning. And first of all, to those people, if you're listening, thank you for coming. Like, thank you for being a part of our community. It's important. Like, I'm not trying to trash you. Anyways, so 2 free wins in an RPQ is like generally pretty standard, unless you're like got a stacked store. Okay. Right. So all right, you've got this list that's like subpar, perhaps like 8 or 9 activations or whatever, and you kind of got 2 free wins, and you're going into like the semis, and you're paired against somebody that's more your skill level caliber. You know, maybe you get lucky. Okay, maybe you just have a good game. Maybe your opponent really screws up and doesn't realize it until it's too late. You know, that can happen.
Yep.
Like, it's not that far fetched to win 2 games as like an outlier. And the other thing is that people are not bringing like super competitively tuned lists to RPQs. I found most of the time, like
they're much more experimental. I've found.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and like at my last RPQ, people they're like, I don't want to bring tauntauns. Everybody's playing tauntauns. And there was like 2 lists with tauntauns in it, and I was like, oh well, all right, you know, that's fine with me, I guess, you know, and that's okay. But like, I guarantee you, there's going to be like 80 lists of tauntauns at Worlds minimum. Maybe not. Maybe.
I mean, they're going to be everywhere.
You know, they're just going to be everywhere. There's going to be 2 or 3 tauntauns in pretty much every Rebel list. Maybe -5 or something. You know, but like most Rebel lists are just going to be 2 or 3 tauntauns with various like taste to, you know, fit options.
Yep.
And that's going to be a bit of a wake-up call if you're not ready for that.
Right. Most lists are going to have shores on the opposite side, right? Like that's going to
Yeah,
be a thing.
you know, like Empire players are just going to be like all shore comms relays. I mean, I'm not saying like that's the perceived meta going into Worlds is Rebels are going to play Tauntauns and Luke and or Sabine, and Empire players are going to be playing Krennic, Shore Trooper comms relay, Death Trooper lists. Like that's kind of what is expected going into it. And I got to say, like, if you're bringing Republic or you're bringing Federation stuff, like, good on you for doing it. 8 activation lists cannot survive an 11 activation Krennic gun line if it's played properly. It's just not possible. Like I don't want to like super stomp on people, but like when people are like, "Oh yeah, man, my 8 activation list is really good against like the meta." No, dude, it's not. Like, I'm sorry.
Two caveats, right? One is you are able to hide your whole army, which is rarely possible. 2, you somehow got limited viz.
Yeah, like, I mean,
right? Like those are like the two situations where you might have a chance.
Okay, so can we clarify this? Because I think what you're saying, it isn't that a non quote unquote meta list out of the 2 lists we just named for Empire and Rebels couldn't be successful. It's that an 8 activation list that is outside the meta is not going to be successful because activation count is one of those things that's very a key ingredient to success right now.
Yeah, it's been an indicator in large tournaments that the higher the activation count, the better off you are, essentially. But there is a diminishing returns threshold.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, like, you probably shouldn't be taking more than 11 or 12 activations. Like, you need some activations to do things, right?
Yeah.
But overall, you know, you're going to get picked apart by somebody that gets to go 4 times after you, right? And don't get me wrong, with a 8 or 9 activation list that has a bunch of good stuff in it, you can steal some games if you get limited viz. Like you can do that. That's a thing that you can be prepared to do if you take a bid and force limited viz, and you know, so there's going to be some games that you win because of that. But in a tournament where you have to play 10 rounds of Legion to win the thing, like you can't steal games and win a tournament.
You know the saying, the more things change, the more they stay the same?
Yeah.
Adepticon 2019, what was the winning list? It was like Luke, Leia, 11 activations, triple snipers.
Mm-hmm.
And now we're coming up on Adepticon again, and now it's looking like, yet again, the winning list is 11 activations, triple snipers, but now it's just Tauntauns and Sabine.
Yeah, I mean, like...
and Leia.
It's interesting, because, like, the C6s are gone, for the most part.
Yep.
Right. Thanks, Shore Troopers.
Yeah, I mean... Yeah, I actually think the answer to that is thank Tauntauns.
Yeah,
but I don't think Shore Troopers.
That's also true.
Like, if Rebels weren't taking Tauntauns, I think they would still be taking Z6s.
Yes, they would.
Like, there's no doubt about that in my mind.
It's like the peasants from Warcraft. No one else available.
Yeah.
You know? Kind of send them into fight.
But you know,
yeah.
I definitely don't want to give anybody like a false sense like Worlds is going to be difficult. It's going to be a lot harder than an RPQ.
Yeah, it is.
Like,
tears may be shed.
Trust me, you are not going to beat Eric Reha playing a 12 activation Tauntaun list, bringing eight activations of Republic. You're going to get stomped. Like, and it's not because you can't play. It's because you're not going to be able to react to the last 5 things he does every turn. You know, and that's like half it. And when, like, listen to that statement. You can't do anything to the last 5 things he did that turn. That means he gets to activate more than half the number of activations in your army after you're done every turn.
Mm-hmm.
Like, think about that. You can't return fire. It's just
I read books on how to improve in chess, and I think one of my favorite lines from the recent book I read was, "No, you cannot in fact do anything you want."
Right. And
you have a responsibility to the position,
yeah.
which means you have a responsibility to the meta, essentially.
So I think the
Legion,
caveat
that is.
there is that an 8 or 9 activation Republic list with like phase 2 clones and Overwatch standby potentially has some opportunity and some play to deal with higher activation lists because Overwatch standby sharing is really good. It's unclear if that's going to be enough to take an 8 or 9 activation list to a point where it can beat a 12 activation Tauntaun list or an 11 activation Shoreline list. That's very undiscovered territory right now. I mean, we're going to see over the next few months, but like outside of that caveat, I know a lot of people are playing Double the Fall right now. David, you've been talking about how that's, like a really good like 8 activation list.
Probably the best 8 activation list that exists right now. If you wanted to take an 8 act list,
I mean, but it's you're still probably like 30-70 against a meta list, I would guess. Assuming like all things equal skill wise, like
yeah.
So I don't know. I just like until Republic and the Trade Federation get like pad activation fillers like the Rebels and Imperials have, I see it's going to be very difficult for them to win major tournaments, and I think we're going to probably see that at LVO in the next couple weeks.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, and I guess I would add to this, to kind of piggyback that is, I think, especially like I just went to a Prime this past weekend, and it was like a very large kind of a melting pot of players, right? We had the we had the world champ there. We had Evan and myself. We had a number of other higher caliber players, and then we had probably 3 or 4 people that were just completely new.
So then you just chopped it up between the lot of you that were the career players, so to speak.
Yeah. And I think so what comes down to is like not just new players, but even players that maybe aren't as heavy into the competitive. And if they're bringing a list that seems slightly off to you, like I don't know that you would chalk that up as something that you're going to see in the future that you need to be prepared for.
I mean, people are going to innovate for Adepticon.
Yes,
like that's going to be a thing. I am expecting to see people put vehicles on the table, to some degree. Chase flipped me the bird right now.
Well, the thing I'm most excited about it was I think it was LJ that dropped this marketing thing that said that we might actually have the clone tank and the AAT in time for Adepticon. God, I hope so. I mean, that'd be awesome.
That would be cool for sure. It might be able to shake up the meta a bit. It's hard to say without having like the full spoilers on them.
Maybe I'll just surprise everybody and play clones. I don't know.
But I mean, like as it stands, they don't have those things.
Yeah, they don't. So we can't work with what we don't have, right?
Yeah.
So I guess what we're trying to say, I think, all the way up to this point, to kind of tie this off in a nice little bow, is that what we're saying is that you went to a local Prime, you won. We want you to be aware and to be ready for your next step, which is Worlds. And in order to do that, if you won with an 8 activation list, there's a solid chance that's not going to carry over to Worlds. And you're going to need to get way more games in that maybe are outside your local group. And if the way you do that is through TTS.
Yes.
If you can.
I mean, TTS is very good for that. I think another like just raw piece of advice is, if your goal is to even just make day 2, that means you're shooting for playing 8 games. You should bank on 4 to 5 of those games being against triple Tauntauns or Shores Comms relays. Like 4 or 5 of those games are going to be that matchup. probably. I mean, maybe not, but I would expect that if you're playing against the field, that is what is going to end up happening. And so you need to be able to bring a list that, whether it's a meta list that you bring or something that you're innovating, it needs to be able to deal with an 11 or 12 activation list on the other side of the table that actually has good pieces in it. And you need to
Yeah.
be ready for that.
Right. So I think you got a couple different like ingredients that go into a good recipe of being a good player. It's getting reps with whatever list you're bringing, as long as it's not 8 activations. You should be, you should be around 10 or 10 to 12. Right, is the sweet spot, depending.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a couple outliers, but depending, that's where you want to be.
I mean,
You want.
I think you got to be at 10 pretty much minimally, and I feel pretty confident in saying that. Like, if you're not at 10, you're going to have a really difficult time in the 12 activation matchups, and
I
you're
think,
going to have them.
Yeah, and I think to your point too, Mike, it's not just about not being able to answer your opponent when they're going and going and going, but psychologically it messes with you too, because I don't know how you guys are, but like when I'm playing, I like zone in and I'm just like play. But then when I'm like waiting for my opponent to like do 5 activations before I can even do anything again, it starts to pull me out of the game psychologically, and I'm not thinking about the game anymore. So it's kind of like a dual threat issue when you're going into the game down 4 activations.
Yeah, and not to speak to the fact that like they get to deploy their best units after your entire army is on the field.
Yeah, they have a huge turn 0 advantage.
So put that in perspective. If they're playing a Sabine, Leia, Ton list, triple Tons, let's say, all 3 Tons and Sabine get to go after you've already activated your entire army.
Yeah.
Right. Like, and then so Sabine like double moves and explosions and hits like 5 of your 8 activations. Like,
yeah,
that's a rough turn too. And especially when you're playing clones or droids, who the droids just melt to the bombs, right? And the clones have a huge issue with the suppression tokens that just got dropped on them, because they pretty much have aggressive tactics instead of strict orders. And strict orders generally isn't even that great in the clone list, because you can't get orders on all of them, and there's no inspire. Like it's tough to deal with that sort of thing.
No,
and
there's
then
a lot of limitations.
And then once you've been explosions, here come the tauntauns, and they run through like 4 of your units, and here's another force suppression for everybody. And
yeah, So I would say your next thing would be, so first was get reps with your list, your non-8 activation list, 10 or above. 2 is try to get either someone in the community to play you with a meta list, or if you can't do that, have one of your friends build one of the meta lists and have them play it against you, at least so you can get a feeling of it on the table, right? It may not be like, if it's your friend who's never played it before and they just put it on the table for you to play against, it may not be your best example of what's out there, but it'll at least get you kind of prepared of what's possible with these lists, right? Would you guys agree with that?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, you should. I mean, you should form a playtest group, essentially, for Adepticon, if you're going. Like, you should find, in best case, you should find someone else that is going and playtest with them. Like, you should find someone else that is going, get together, like, come up with a bunch of different lists you think are going to be like the meta, and practice whatever you're innovating or whatever you're going to play against that list of potential opponent lists, and take turns being the bad guy or whatever. And that's what you should do. If you have to do it on TTS, fine. If you can find somebody in real life to do that with, that's probably even better. It's also worth noting that, like, generally a lot of the time people get used to playing on like their terrain in the store. The Adepticon terrain is like very specific, and I don't think, I mean, I don't know specifically, but I imagine that it's a lot of the terrain that got used last year. If I had to guess. And we'll see at LVO. I think there's a couple new tables, but for the most part, it's a lot of the same stuff. Look at those pictures. Try and make your boards similar to like the layouts and stuff that you see. LJ takes all sorts of awesome pictures. Brendan takes all sorts of awesome pictures of these board layouts. You should be looking at those and kind of practicing on similar tables.
Yeah. And then I think my third thing is, I know we've talked about this a bunch, but like I even made the mistake this past Prime. So I was drinking, I was all fluided up. I made that special drink we had on our blog that tastes like Gatorade, but it was all homemade. Like I was hydrated, I slept, but you know what happened was we went 4 rounds with a cut to top 2. Our first break wasn't until 6:00.
Whoa.
So like,
Okay.
luckily I had brought some snacks, but like I didn't pack myself a sandwich or something like substantial. And so like I basically went from like, I think I had a sandwich at like 9:30, like a breakfast sandwich. So I went from 9:30 a.m. until like basically 6:15 before I ate again. And like, so that was crazy. And so like what I'm saying and what I'm trying to like boil it down to is, especially with Adepticon LVO, like we're looking at 12 to 15 hours of playing. Like you need to be prepared for that. It is no small task to do that, it's not just the physical, but like you're mentally like just like going at it for at least 3 straight hours at a time, and then maybe having like a 10-minute break before you're mentally going at it 3 straight hours again. You know what I mean? Like it's a lot to take on, and you really need to like be aware of what the physical tolls that can take on you, not just the standing up, but like just like mentally going at someone for 3 hours.
We don't mean to scare you away if that sounds intimidating. It's really not as crazy as we're making it sound, maybe. But yeah, I mean, this is just the facts, right? Like Legion is a game where concentration plays a huge role. You're gonna be concentrating for a long time. You're gonna need to find ways to supplement your energy levels.
Yeah,
especially if you don't know what the schedule is in advance.
Like I would highly recommend, if you got like a Fitbit or something, wear it one day at like a major tournament. Like the first day of Adepticon, I burned 5,000 calories.
Yeah.
Okay. Like 5,000. Like if you know anything about like calorie burning and like daily caloric whatever, that's a metric. Ton.
Well, to put it into perspective, if you lead a sedentary lifestyle where you're sitting most time, like at an office, you don't get a ton of exercise, basically just walking to your car and back, maybe a little bit of walking during the day, you literally should only be taking in about 1,800 calories a day.
Right.
So for him to burn double the triple what his normal daily intake would be, for a sedentary person, I'm not, but like that's crazy talk. Like there's no way you replenish those calories fast enough. And that's why you're exhausted. That's why by round 3, round 4, like I remember LVO last year, round 4, I was playing Nathan from Critical X, and I was like, we were both like dying.
Yeah.
On the round 4, like going, dude, I don't know. Okay, fine. Like, you know what I mean? Yeah. Like it was just like my hand was shaking. I was so hungry. Like it was just like, it was crazy.
Yeah. Notably, Kyle always is packing like 30 Cliff Bars. So
yeah, Kyle's a veteran. He knows what's better in these events. Man, Joe, we're gonna put like a medical advice disclaimer on this episode.
Well, and
not a doctor, just a lot of internet.
And we have that blog that an actual doctor wrote, so you can go read that. He talks about food and water intake and all that. But and once again, we're not trying to scare you. I just I think about this a lot because I wasn't prepared for LVO. Like that was my first major Legion tournament, and I just was not prepared for what that was. And I still find myself even this last weekend I made some mistakes. Like I brought snacks and stuff, but I wasn't getting to them fast enough to feed my hunger that I had.
Yeah, and we're talking right now really about one day. This tournament is like 3 days.
Yeah.
Right? Like,
it lasts a long time. Gen Con was 2 days and it was still pretty bad.
Right, and it's just like you're not doing this once. If you're winning, you're doing it twice, maybe 3 times in a row. And that's a lot. And if you're us, you're doing it once, twice, maybe 3 times plus streaming. It's gonna be a lot. But
that's gonna be me, boys.
Right?
3 days. 3 days in streaming.
Nice.
Just make sure you stretch.
Yeah, if you're us, we're going to do it in January and then in March again.
Yeah.
But and so I just get worried, and I want to kind of say, like, I don't mean to say that you, the listener, aren't ready. I just want to make sure that you are, and so I'm trying to like prepare you. We all are trying to prepare you for what you're about to enter. If you're coming to Worlds and you've never been to a tournament like this, and you've only won your Prime or your RPQ, and now you're coming to Worlds, like, this is a reality that you're going to need to face.
Jay's been so worried about this topic, guys. He's like just been like chomping at the bit. He's like, I gotta talk about this. Should we talk about it today on your cast? Like, all right.
Well, okay, because here's why. Everyone at my Prime was super nice, super kind. We had 5 or 6 guys that had invites. Luckily, the person that came in second place didn't have an invite, so it just went to him. But what had happened if it had gone to the 6th person? I'm just worried for that person that they're ill prepared. Just seeing guys that are just starting, or maybe this is only their second tournament or something. Their second Prime tournament or local tournament. And I worry for them, and I don't want them to get turned off to the circuit and stuff because they go into a large tournament ill prepared for what's about to happen.
So first of all, your Prime had the top 6 of the top 7 people had invites before the tournament started.
Yeah.
Okay. First of all, that's ridiculous. And I like for a store level, I mean, I don't know. I guess that was kind of like the Nova RPQ last year, but like, geez, that's not going to be the case for everybody. I don't think that should be a prime.
I understand.
Worry.
No. My worry isn't not that that'll happen at every store. My worry is that if it had gone to like 6th or 7th place, is that person who it would have gone to prepared? So what I'm saying is there's got to be other stores out there that don't have a competitive scene like we're lucky enough to have up here. You know what I mean? That it's a little less competitive. So I'm thinking of those guys going, okay, man, like you're going to the big leagues. If you're going to Chicago, here's what you need to expect.
Yeah. And we're going to welcome you with big open arms.
Oh yeah, everybody's super cool,
and it's going to be awesome. Don't
bring an 8 activation list.
I mean, or do just
and bring a sandwich.
I think the main thing to take into account here is if you really want to bring an 8 activation list, you can do that. You just need to have the expectation that you're not going to take down the tournament with it, and you need to understand that. And if you're accepting of that and you're just going to have a good time and play the sweet 8 activation list that you feel really have a really fun time playing, great. I salute you. That is a thing that you can do. And if that's how you get your jollies and that's how, it's fun for you and that's how you Legion, like do you, man. And that's okay. But I don't want people to get the wrong idea that like you should bring that list if you want to win.
Yeah, I guess. So I had met some dude, gosh, I think it was LVO. He was like one of my first round games, and he was just like, oh yeah, dude, I suck. Like, I'm just here to have fun. Like, I just love to play. And this was just fun. We're in Vegas. Like, it's all cool. I'm not worried about winning anything. Like, I'm just having a good time. And that is awesome. That does not compute to me, like on any level. Like, I get really competitive. So I'm just like, what? Like, but if that's what you're there for, disregard everything we're talking about. and just go and have a great time. But if you actually are thinking you may have a chance to win, then we're more talking to you.
Yeah.
Luke Cook, if you can hear this, bring double the fall.
I'm sure that there are going to be people out in the community that are competitive that are going to be like, no, you can win with 8 activations, 9 activations. I get that a lot.
They're wrong.
Okay, I'm gonna say this, and it might earn me some hate. All right, and I'm gonna say this. There's a lot of. I mean, I was trying to find a word for this, and I couldn't come up with any better word. There is a lot of hipsterism in our community when it comes to running meta.
That may be
for real.
That may be Fifth Trooper's fault. I think I had like 3 or 4 episodes where I said there is no meta. So, that might be our fault.
But it's not even just like it's not even like there is no meta. It's like I know what the meta is and I know it's good, but I'm not gonna run it because I'm gonna be I'm so countercultural that I'm actually the mainstream.
So, okay, let me ask you this,
it's
David.
one of those sorts of things.
How do you okay, that's fair. So how do you judge something that's just being countercultural just to be counter? Or how do you judge something that someone was like, I think this is actually a good counter to the meta?
They took a good list and made it worse.
Okay.
That's how we know.
So like they took 1 ton instead of 3, or they took like
well,
that
okay.
type of thing.
I'm guilty of this because I've done it. Okay, as part of this.
You hipster.
I know. from California, it makes complete sense.
Yep.
So let's say you took Luke Sabine or Leia Sabine and swapped in 3 rotaries. That's objectively worse. Like it doesn't actually do better than Leia Sabine triple tauns. There's no evidence that it did better, but you did it because you think Aetartes countered tauntauns. Unfortunately, that's a complete misread. Leia Sabine tauntauns works because it's Leia Sabine tauntauns. And I mean, we can go into a huge discussion about this, but just don't be a hipster, okay? Just play what's good and play what you know is good, and don't worry about it.
Yeah.
Just play what's good.
It's really
well. I think.
It's not a crime.
Yeah. Do you guys feel like? Because I feel like I get like this sometimes. And maybe I am a hipster, but like judging by my sweater, I probably am. But sometimes I look at the meta and I go, this can't be everything that there is. Like I'm a smart guy. I feel like I can build a list that could defeat that, and you just kind of like miss the mark completely. Do you know what I mean? Because you're just like trying so hard to be different, I guess, but not to be contrarian, but just to like.
Well, I think
like this can't be everything. This just can't be it.
I think right now people are in a place where like, and I'm there too. Like I don't like the meta. The meta sucks.
Me either.
Like it's not great. It's not super innovative, though. I hope somebody can break it open. But I don't expect that to happen. At least not at LVO. I would be very surprised if a triple ton or double ton or shoreline list didn't win LVO.
Likewise.
Like I would be flabbergasted, and I will eat my words in 3 weeks if that happens. But I don't see it happening. I mean, it pisses me off that I can't really play Vader right now, and like put him on a competitive table. Like that makes me mad.
Me too.
Like I don't know.
I'm sad that Luke Skywalker is actually not fast enough to be competitive anymore.
But that
you shut your dirty
that all being said, if we remember LVO last year, Lupo brought that triple Sabs list that was spanking people. I mean, it is something like that could happen.
So,
right.
First of all, if I recall correctly, Lupo lost at LVO.
In round,
he lost to me. Yes,
5,
that's why I was pointing that out.
Last year.
And round 5 was not the finals, really. Like that tournament should have gone 2 or 3 more rounds.
Yeah,
like
agreed.
Like don't get me wrong, Lupo's a great player. He plays Sabs really well, but like
I also got really lucky. Like, sorry, you're gonna have to mute that. But It's kind of true.
I mean, like, I think that's a case of, like, I've got this really cool list. Sometimes it doesn't hold up, even under the best of circumstances.
Yeah.
There was also a standby situation at the end that we misread, and it was kind of a screwy game stay, but we sort of just let it go.
Anyway, point being, like, I mean, we don't know who won LVO last year, really.
Right. We will.
Yeah, there was no clear winner.
Like, we had what, 5 people 5-0 or something at the end of the night.
Like three 5-0s and 3 4-1s. I think was the. And I think John Griffin got it by strength of schedule or something.
Yeah, which is great. I mean, like, Palpatine was kind of like a new thing at that point. Turns out Palpatine is still pretty good. He won Nova. I hope that he's healthy enough to continue to survive the meta, but I think as people, figure out these short, I think he's pretty good against Tauntauns. I don't think he's great against short lines.
Yeah, I think he's a dark horse. I think you'll see him.
I think people will play him for sure. Like,
yeah,
you're gonna see
him. You'll see him at Worlds.
I'm not sure how good it's gonna be, but he definitely is a minor player in the meta.
Just make sure you know what Given to Your Anger actually does. That's what I'll say.
You gotta play on that card.
It was a funny story. It's like, what does this card do again? Really?
I don't know what you're talking about, David.
I have no idea.
Okay. All right. Cool.
Yeah. All right. Well, we kind of came in with a plan, and we've been kind of just spinning on competition for the last hour and a half. We've hit some good milestones, I think.
Yeah, I think so too.
Yeah, I think we're gonna close it out. We got any final thoughts before we get going here?
Just be prepared, everybody.
I don't think that's the message we're delivering today, and I think we've missed the mark if that's the message we delivered.
What is the message?
I think the message is play Legion your way, and if playing Legion your way means going to Worlds and winning, be prepared.
All right.
I think I just, like, I want to qualify that because I don't think it's fair to be like, I don't know.
Okay.
Jay, Mr. Competitive.
Out of left field, huh?
Right.
I thought I was on the competitive podcast. I got all confused. You guys went soft.
I just want everybody to know that Jay was tried to tell me like a month ago. He's like, man, I don't think I should play Worlds. I should just stream the whole thing. And I was like, dude,
you're full of it.
You're gonna regret that so hard. And you listen to him now. He's like, I'm competitive. I'm gonna win this thing. I'm gonna take it down. And
you guys, listen. Everyone at Fifth Trooper Network forced me into a competitive mind state. This is the monster you created. Just so you know, I was trying to slow it down and be like, nah, I won't play. But you guys are like, no, come on, man. You got to play. You got to compete. Well, here I am. The monster's real. The beast from the east. Here I come.
The Fifth Trooper Frankenstein is about to be unleashed on the world.
That's right.
You're welcome, world. We've given you Jay Shalansky. All right.
Let's close it down. For Notorious Scoundrels, I'm David.
I'm Mike.
I'm Jay.
We'll see you next time.
Ban line and wait.
Join us next week for another episode of the Notorious Scoundrels.
This has been a Fifth Trooper production.